Welcome to Solutions Rising. I'm Rachel Branch, and it is a real pleasure today for me to introduce Yina Moore. She is the CEO and president of the Adams Theater and the astounding work that she is doing in this theater in Adams, and we're going to talk about it. She's created a space for all kinds of really meaningful programs. Her story and her community involvement is truly exciting, meaningful, and part of what needs to be happening in communities and their connections to the arts. And of course, think I've said this before, your writers, your musicians, your actors, all your are so much a part of visionary work that they're doing. And you are promoting that. And I am so grateful that you agreed to be a guest on Solutions Rising. And I always start off and say, would you please tell whatever you would like about your heritage, your background?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was born and raised in Shanghai, China, until I was 18. And I grew up in a multi-generational family where my grandmother is the head of the household, and then my five cousins and my parents' siblings all live in the same household together. So it's kind of communal living in the 80s.
Just,
Oops.
there you go. Okay.
Communal living in the 80s. I do not remember that we have a toilet until I was maybe 8 or 7. That's when we actually installed plumbing and toilet. So that's my heritage and background. And I went to a school in Shanghai that teaches young children English and foreign languages since the age of 11. So it's a combined junior high and high school. And it was a very competitive school to get into. And in the 70s, my high school trained a lot of diplomatic talents in China, and they subsequently take on diplomatic roles or went abroad to work. And in my generation, I grew up in the 80s and late 90s. I went to that school to learn English, and many of my classmates ended up studying abroad. That's how I actually came to America, is through my high school's kind of educational background.
And when you came to America, where did you land?
I landed in New York City shortly before I started college at Hamilton College in upstate New York.
Yeah. And then your background, I did read about your background, architecture and economics.
Yeah.
I loved economics.
Thank you.
And please tell us how you got involved with theater and the journey to get to the Adams Theater, which is just astounding what you're doing.
Yeah, I guess to talk about how I got into theater, you kind of mentioned that I actually came from studying economics and architecture as my background. So when I was in China, architecture is always my passion. If we didn't have to go into too much detail, but if I didn't come to the U.S., I would have been studying architecture in one of the very esteemed architecture university school program in Shanghai. But because my family decided to come to America, and then we immigrated to America, I didn't give up my architecture dream. I also applied and got into a very good program at Cornell for architecture when I was 18. But because of immigration anxiety, financial concern, and all these other issues, I decided to take a full scholarship from Hamilton College. So I got a free ride to go to a really good liberal arts school. And then again, I was kind of torn. I thought I want to, at some point, get back to architecture, but I wasn't sure. I just didn't know this country well enough to know how do I carve out a path for myself. So I studied economics and fine arts, the two kind of subjects that I personally was really interested in at Hamilton College, thinking that maybe one day I can go back to architecture school if I keep both options open. And I kind of just followed that plan that I had for myself when I was 18. When I get to America, I studied economics, got into finance, got myself green card, and finally feeling secure as an immigrant in America. That's when I felt, okay, I can go back to pursue my architecture and arts now. And along the way, I lived in New York. I was very exposed to the performing arts world. I was actually a young board member of a theater educational company, theater educational nonprofit called Opening Act. So in New York City, through my extracurricular activity outside of my finance job, I get to connect with the performing arts and continue to develop my dream in studio arts. So when, again, later on in life when I have family, had young children, I ask myself this question, do I want to just keep going on in finance for the rest of my career, or do I want to go back to what I wanted to do, as a young 16-year-old? That's how I decided to get back to architecture and at Harvard. So I didn't go back to architecture school until I was 35. I was a mother of two.
My goodness.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It's just amazing. Of course, you cannot be in New York City and not be influenced. And I mean, there's so much art, so much theater, and so much architecture right there in New York City. Living right there is just a whole
but
potpourri
it's in a
of.
different way. In New York, you're going to these, performing arts program, go to theater, go to arts as a spectator. You're not
Yes.
participating in the making of things. When I was in architecture school, of course, we're learning about the making of things, the creating a vision, and how do you design around it? How do you make it happen? So it could be an architecture of a building, but it could also be an architecture of a structural, plan, of a master plan, or of anything. So I'm more interested in how to become an architect of certain, vision, certain solutions to living problems, to urban problems. So somehow I took that skill set in architecture, and then somehow, through the coincidental, meeting of people in the Berkshires, applying those skills into the making of the theater, the reviving, the revitalization of a building. So that was not what I expected when I go back to architecture, when I went back to architecture school,
And here you got to use that skill.
Yeah.
I actually worked for a little while for an architect in Connecticut named Edward Sutt, who came out of World War II. And one of the things I had to do was call up people that he was designing homes for, because he wanted it to fit. He wanted to know, do you want the sun in the morning or later? He wanted to know their living, but he also wanted to make it, his architecture, to fit in with nature. And so his structures were quite beautiful.
That's great.
Yeah. So did your coming to the Berkshires and then the Adams Theater have more to do with your architecture background and what you were going to do with this theater?
Yes, it has more to do with my architecture background. I was hired by Tom Kranz in North Adams to help him doing the prototyping of the Train and Architecture Model Museum. So I was hired as a consultant in 2019, and that's when I started my weekly commute to North Adams. So I would come up here on Monday and then go back to New York City to my family and children on Thursday. Well before the pandemic, that's how I got started to be exposed to the area. Yeah.
And then you were aware of what was happening at the Adams Theater, and you met the two women that were trying to save that theater.
And what connected me to the Adams Theater, or initially to Mohawk Theater in North Adams, was really the pandemic. Because when I was working as a consultant, I did my weekly commute. I wasn't really connected with the community. I came here to work, and then I went back to New York. But during the pandemic, my whole family decided to come here for 9 months. So we spent 9 months in North Adams. Even though we're all battling the pandemic, but I get to actually experience friendship and the communities beyond just working as a consultant. And that's when I heard about the Mohawk Theater that was also looking for a solution, looking for a revival plan. And that was my initial interest, is because there is an RFP that the city put out, looking for people who can rethink about how to revive the Mohawk Theater. And then after spending so much time with Tom, I just thought, anything in the Berkshires can happen. You take an old building, you can make it new. You take a broken theater, you can, rejuvenate it. So I was having this, desire to do something, to plug myself into the arts and cultural scene in the Berkshires. That's when the Mohawk kind of RFP came on board.
I grew up in North Adams. I'm native North Adams, was born here, and went to the movies at the Mohawk Theater as a child. And it's very sad to me that that hasn't been saved and renovated, but maybe something will
maybe
happen.
one day.
But you're doing in Adams what actually should be happening right here with the Mohawk Theater.
Right. So it's it's funny what life takes you. So
Yes.
the city of North Adam rejected my plan. It was in the middle of the pandemic. There is a lot of communication that could have happened in person, maybe didn't. So I was looking around for another venue to realize this dream, or to revive a building. And then I found out that Adams Theater was for sale by Nana and Karen. So I connected with them. It all started with a
They
Zoom
did beautiful work.
Yeah.
There, they did an awful lot of.
Did you get to go to the Adams Theater during the time when Nana and Karen were doing work?
I didn't go to performance there, I don't think, but I went on a tour of it while they were renovating it.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. So, and you have also bought the inn, the Topia?
Topia Inn happened 2 years after the Adams Theater.
Oh, you started the Adams Theater first.
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And now you and I think share in common that theater, community theater, really has to be about community. And of course, I think everything that's important starts locally and works its way up and then worldwide. And of course, I first met you because of Marty Kovler and Marty's and his group who put together Floating Tower Immigrant and Refugee Artist Retreat here in North Adams that my great aunt had owned in 1917, which is how I met him. His Shadows of Forgotten Ancestors was amazing, and what you did, and the fact that you added 50 seats both nights to make the capacity 150, your relationship with the fire commissioners who were so wonderful there, and it was stunning, absolutely stunning. I mean, that for me, that performance, which because of you and your generosity also raised $7,000 for the people of Ukraine. And that whole performance, even as little part of the community choir, brought you to tears. And the whole visual, it's stunning to even know how that happened. So I'd like you to talk about community connections and please what you have coming up in the near future.
I really want to start with my friendship with Marty. Actually, my friendship with Marty started even before I purchased the Adams Theater. Would you believe it? So I was in the middle of, considering purchasing the Adams Theater, and he was in the middle of purchasing Chase Hill to turn that into a residency. And a common friend put us in touch and said, you guys should talk. Yina's doing a theater and he's a musician composer. So that's how we get connected. And believe it or not, even before I purchased the theater, Marty has told me, I am working on some really interesting productions and I want them to debut at Adams Theater. It was it was a joke, it was a wishful thinking, but there is a seed that we both put into each other's head well before our project even took form in this area. And I had been invited to Marty's performances, recitals at the Chase Hill. My family visited their residency in Brooklyn. So we kind of established a friendship and a conversation going on. And I often sought his advice as well as the Adams Theater programming and renovations start taking place. He came here to check the acoustics for me, look at the space. So anything, collaboration, when we put the shadows together, we have to put a lot of trust in each other.
Yes.
We didn't have a contract, we have a handshake agreement. We just set up, let's a bunch of, creative artists, talented people put together, see what we can create. But that trust and friendship kind of had years in development before we leading to the point of we're actually ready to do something. And then during that process, I saw what Marty can put together and the type of talents that he has brought to North Adams from all over the world. And he has seen me doing work at Adams Theater, things that I said that I was going to do, I end up doing. So I think he had certain confidence in my ability to execute, and I had confidence in his ability to bring talents together and to create production together. So all these kind of development of friendship and development of creative, I guess, synergies took place for years before we lead to the point of the shadows of forgotten ancestors. So right around this time of last year, I approached Mati. He is one of the artistic advisors for Adams Theater. I said, look, next year I'm gonna put together a season. I don't have confidence that I can do a full season, but maybe we'll do something like 2 weekends in the spring, 1 weekend in the fall, just to get some festival, get something going on in between phases of construction, so that people know what type of program we're going to put into the place. People know who are behind the projects. So at the time, I was asking Mati for advice, what we should put together. And I remember it was maybe early December, I invited Mati and a bunch of other creative friends, advisors into my house to have a conversation. And during that meeting, Mati met Joe Wheaton. You remember Joe, who is a projection artist for that show? So all these dots kind of connected at that meeting. And Mati and Joe had a great conversation. They had admired each other's work for years. Since Mati's earlier, involvement with Turnpike at the Stockbridge, West Stockbridge area. And Joe had, heard of his name. So then they started talking about a potential collaboration. So in about, 2-3 months in February of this year, Joe and Mati came to me. They said, hey, we want to do something. And we want to do a production that is based on the music and culture of Ukraine. And we want it to happen at Adams Theater. So, the three of us, I see us as creative collaborators. So we each develop relationship and friendship and know what everybody could bring to the table. And then that's what kind of lead to the production.
I met Marty Kohler because I was trespassing.
Yeah.
And he opened the door, and that's what started. He's just so warm and welcoming. I had no idea he had been a fellow at Tanglewood, and I love Tanglewood. I've been going there since high school.
Yeah.
And then when I said, gee, could I audition for your community choir? And he said,
Yeah.
you're already in. I heard you singing. And I mean, there were, I think, 5 of us that were part of the community choir.
I remember that night.
Oh.
You were telling me, you said, Yina, this night is just unforgettable, unbelievable. I remember we were talking in front of the theater. Yeah.
Highlight of my life, but it brings you to tears at the end, and it is very, very heartwarming, heartbreaking story about these wonderful Ukrainian people and their lives. And then, of course, you see the realities of what's happening with the war. I mean, people could not even speak at the end. It took several minutes before people started clapping because it was so touching. And I don't think that performance belongs on Broadway. It belongs worldwide. It is such an amazing performance. I hope it was videotaped. But yes, that started my friendship with him, and through him I met a couple of other artists, and Masha, who plays violin, and she said, that day in January, I'm playing at Nasmoka, would you come? And I thought, oh, it'd be a long day. Yes, I'll come. Could not, had to be there.
Right.
So we'll come back to the Adams. I mean, you are just to be applauded and revered for the work that you are doing and the commitment that you've made to the arts and the theater, which is not just, I mean, I met someone I knew from high school who had come from New York to see this. I couldn't believe that we're meeting. And that's bringing people together, but also what they're learning in theater. So I know you have some more performances coming up, and would you tell us a little bit about what is happening now and upcoming? I know there's some artists that you would like to highlight.
Yeah, so my vision for the Adams Theater is always about using art, pushing the boundary of art to bring people together. And it can take many forms. I wanted Adam Theater's programming to be eclectic, has a universal appeal. Not everybody is going to like everything that's happening in the theater. But in this pop-up season that we just had, we kind of experimented programming that has more entertainment, appeal, universal appeal to people who want to have a good laugh, want to experience comedy. But we also experimented doing work in progress, like Marty's production, new work.
Can't believe he calls it a work in progress. It's so spectacular.
Well, but you saw it work in progress during that week being developed. And trying to bring outside voices into here to connect with the community. So there's kind of a wide spectrum I'm trying to stretch with the program. And the next show, which is also going to be our last presentation for the whole season, is going to take place on October 28th. And the artists who are going to present to us are actually in Adams Theater right now. They're doing a 3-week residency. And, believe it or not, they are here in Adams because of the production we were doing with Marty on Floating Tower. Because at the time, my programming sidekick, director of artistic initiative, Carolyn Brooks, saw a great production called Motherland in New York City that was directed by Audrey Rose, who is the artist that's currently at the Adams Theater.
Oh, wonderful.
And she brought 4 Ukrainian refugee artists from Ukraine last year, developed this play, and got them the visa, paid them wage, and touring them in the United States. They went to New York, they went to DC, and they toured, I believe they toured 17 or 20 times in the US with Motherland. And it was the cast was 5 women and a baby. The baby was Audrey's daughter, Lily. And then from the beginning of the tour to the end of the tour, Lily grew from 2-month-old to, I believe, an 8-month-old. And then Carolyn, my programming coordinator, she saw the play. She's like, we should also support their work. I love what you're doing with Floating Tower, but let's build upon it. So then we reached out to Audrey, which we never met, literally just on Zoom, and asked her, would she be interested in taking Motherland to Adams Theater? And she said actually she's forming a theater group that explore not just Ukraine, but also cultures that are going through political oppression. And this year's project is to work with a Kurdish artist, exploring the Kurdish cultural and heritage, and also bring to light the political oppression, especially in the wake of the earthquake. And Karen and I said, where is that production at right now? She said, it's in development. We were like, do you want a development space? She said, yes. So Audrey right now is at the theater. They're making puppets, masks for this particular theater piece that will be launched and incubated in Adams Theater, and then they're taking it on to their next tour.
Is this the one? Is this the October 28th?
Yes.
I must come
And
to that.
she's going to also do a workshop at Williams College tomorrow, Tuesday afternoon, that is focusing on cultural oppression-related, physical body movement to heal trauma that is related to cultural.
I must try
oppression.
to go to that too. And of course, Marty had some young people in
And
shadows that had come out of Ukraine.
Yeah, and sadly, it's particularly relevant to the world that we live in right now. And, so I think these workshops could be very, very telling, very helpful.
And informative.
Yeah, informative.
So important.
Yeah.
And you and I have talked before. I'm going to read a piece. Marty is now in Israel.
Yeah.
And I think both of us are just horrified at what is happening. I got caught in the 6-day Arab-Israeli war, and I'm going to read a piece, with your permission, that I wrote. Actually, I didn't write it till 2008, but I am very concerned. It always seems to affect the most vulnerable, the children, the elderly, the disabled, the women. The most vulnerable people are always the objects. But this is what happened to me in June of 1967, and this is called Recollection of Vietnam and the 6-day Arab-Israeli War in June 1967. It was the middle of the night, and the fighter pilots at Wheelus Air Base were flying training missions. The thundering noise over the villa woke me in a cold sweat and full of fear that my husband would be going to Vietnam, where his life expectancy as a reconnaissance officer was under 5 minutes. We were at Shaw Air Force Base in Sumter, South Carolina, when President Kennedy was assassinated, the beginning of the real terrors in my life. And in 1965, we were sent to Tripoli, Libya, North Africa. I loved living in Libya. We learned some Arabic. We made friends with our neighbors. We went into the old city of Tripoli often. We also traveled to Tunisia, Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon, and many places in Europe from there. My name became Miriam. To this day, talking about Libya, I can hear the children in my neighborhood calling him, Miriam, Miriam, kifalik, how are you? Or Miriam, Miriam, bakshish, gifts. Or hear the donkey clopping down the dirt road next to our villa and the morning prayers sung from the minaret. His Majesty Mohammed Idris El Mahdi El Sanusi, the first and only king of the Kingdom of Libya, was a benevolent king who attempted to uplift his people. In Rivers to the Sea, Walt Wandel wrote that King Idris built his life on firm adherence to the tenets of Islam. Among quotations from the Prophet Muhammad, from which he drew guidance for himself and his people, was, "Do not enter into disputes, otherwise you shall fail and lose all of your power." In this, he found a key for the quiet diplomacy which marked his course and leadership, as well as an exhortation for the unity of his people. By 1966, I was secretary to the Chief of Information and Civil Affairs at Wheelus Air Base, a very sensitive job which required liaison with the royal family, the Libyan government, and all the embassies. One of my jobs was to escort Queen Fatima when she flew from Benghazi to Tripoli. At 24, this was an awesome and somewhat overwhelming experience. And then the next thing I know, the 6-day Arab-Israeli war has started, and I'm on the phone with the charge d'affaires as he dictates a message about the war that will go on the Air Force radio and television station. And I thought I was petrified by that experience. Then I remember looking out at the Mediterranean Sea and wondering if we were going to be killed. My last day in Tripoli, we were allowed to drive off base in sweltering heat with the windows closed so I could quickly pack one bag. Cairo radio was screaming, "Get the Americans," but my neighbors and I looked at each other with sadness. Recently, they had rescued me and the little girl next door from a rabid dog in the garage under the villa. We had shopped in their small shops in Sukajuma. We treated our neighbors with respect. We warmed to their children. I had hired a quote-unquote houseboy, Ali Talha, who was trying to help his mother raise 6 children. Ali's father had died of alcoholism, as had mine. Of course, I did not need someone to help me care for our villa, but my heart would not let go of him, and I made up work or let him do things I could very well have done myself. For the first time in my life, it was appalling for me to discover children looking for food in our garbage can. I was brokenhearted because I knew I was only one person and could not feed all those children. It was dispiriting to have to accept that fact and then attempt to recover some semblance of hope by resolving to help as much as I could throughout my life. Ali came to us the night before the war started and was crying, thinking the Americans wanted war. We tried to explain to this very smart young man that we did not want war. His conception of the world was so limited at the time, and I hated to leave him there. And after the war, our neighbors protected our home. Meanwhile, the water outside the base was blown up. People were killed in Tripoli. We even heard someone had been quartered downtown. I found myself spending my last night sleeping on the barracks floor, being whisked away the next morning on an Air Force cargo plane, then flown to Zaragoza, Spain, before being flown back to the States. On June 9, 1967, the information officers asked me to gather together some wives to speak to the press. I spent several hours talking with reporters, including Gabe Pressman from NBC News for Huntley and Brinkley, The last reporter saw me crying, trying to make arrangements to get to Massachusetts. My sister-in-law had just asked where my husband was. It was the first time I had had a moment to contemplate the fact that I might not ever see him again, and it was his birthday. The terror of realizing you might not see a loved one alive again is inconceivable and inexplicable. It numbs the mind and the being. It absorbs every pore of your body. It is not glorious. It is not cool. It is not exciting. It is not fun. It is surreal. And the weight of the horror presses on your soul. For nearly all my life, there have been wars and bloodshed and violence and horror, and it all seems so wasted, so unnecessary, so killing of the human spirit. And the fighters always wind up around a table negotiating peace treaties. Today, there is no more time to play war games. If I could give the world a gift to stop any more wars, it would be a giant round table where everyone could sit at the table of peace first. It seems so simple for people to meet one-on-one to keep peace. So this is my prayer. Great, eternal, and Holy Spirit, please set the table of peace today. And we can keep going. I really felt a need to read this today because of what is going on in the Middle East. And it's like I am back there all these years again, and here we are with a horror show going on over there. And the things you care about and I care about and Marty care about is people coming together and being in community together. So I hope that it was all right on your show that I read this piece because I am just really so horrified to see what is happening.
Thank you for sharing this.
You are very, very welcome. Now, as we get to final thoughts or whatever else you would like, I certainly want to have a moment to ask anybody who would like to contribute to the Adams Theater how they do that. And we are putting your website up on the air.
So after the season is over, at the end of this month, we're going to go back into construction mode, and we will launch an annual fund. And stay tuned. We'll let everybody know how to contribute.
And your info at adamstheater.org.
Yes, and the annual fund, by the way, is to allow us to do the same work that we do this year, but magnify it. So this year in the pop-up season, we presented altogether 15 performances, and next year we want to do 30. We want to double what we can offer to the community and to the arts.
And I also noticed so that anybody who perhaps a low-income person, you have a little way for sliding scale, so someone who might not otherwise be able to go could attend.
Yeah,
and also people can buy gift.
Yeah, this year we had 500 comp tickets, more than 500, a little over 500 that is given based on request and based on the fact that many others pay extra for others who can't.
Yes, yes, it's wonderful.
So that's right around 30 to 35 per performance.
Oh my goodness, that's absolutely beautiful, and that's what it's about. You're sitting here talking about everything that I care about and believe in, and I hope you will. And of course, final thoughts. Is there anything else you would like to say? I just hope you will come again and be a guest on Solutions Rising.
Oh, come to see the October 28th presentation.
I will.
Audrey and her team put together.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's quite amazing. Her collaborator, Haval, just got her visa approved to come from Europe. She is the one that's of Kurdish origin, and she met Audrey in Paris where they study theater together. So she's flying into Boston this weekend, and then they're going to continue to collaborate, work on a few scenes together for the upcoming production. And they're going to tour New York, I believe Chicago, and Washington, D.C. as well, and Pittsburgh.
If the two of you would like to come back and do a program, even though it won't get on the air before, we could do one after October 28th and talk about it.
That would be great,
Yes, of course, we're advertising it right now.
Yeah.
So
Wonderful.
this will. So
let's try that.
Thank you. I am honored that you are my guest, and
Thank you, Rachel.
I say at this stage in my life, there are no coincidences. You met Marty, and I met Marty, and we met each other, and look at this international gathering of people that really care about what is happening in the world and presenting thoughtful, very informative productions that are so important for every community. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rachel.
And if each one of us pick up one problem and solve it, imagine the incredible view we would all have of solutions rising. Thank you, Yina Moore, for being my guest. And we send our heartfelt love and care to Monty Kovler and his family and all those in the Middle East. And we pray for their deliverance from fear and the horrific horrors that are going on right now. Thank you.